uphill road for GIANTX as they start to try and get these new pieces working together. Whereas when we look across at Mad Lions Koi, I think this is obviously a new band of upstarts coming in. A lot of these guys coming up from EMEA Masters this year. We'll have to see if they're going to be able to find that success for themselves.
Give it up, Berlin. Here we are. Jackie's VTO fist bump. Ignar returning to the stage against Hylissang. Banger support matchup, I just have to say. Absolute fire here to kick us off. Coaches coming out on stage as well. Moments away now from Picks and Bans. I'm hyped, man. I'm ready to see what these guys have got.
I realized I just completely brain farted and started talking about Mad Lions Koi when Vitality here. My brain just went, no, which is the next game.
Fair,
it is the next game.
To be fair, Mac and Pad have joined Team Vitality. Hylissang and Carzzy have joined Team Vitality.
That
so
is
I think
fair.
an excusable brain fart, Rob.
Yeah.
We'll accept that. Although we do need to find a new term for that particular thing. I don't know if brain fart is super great. Here you go. You now see Coach Carter. Of course, Mac has moved into a managerial position. So is Carter and Pad on stage. Facing down the opposition.
I think for me, the big question mark here is going to be for Vitality. Douglas, you kind of gave him, as we talked about in E4, a clean slate coming into this split where Vitality was a bit of a disaster last year. So trying to see if he can now slot in with this new roster, I think is going to be super interesting. As we do get into picks and bans, looks like, I imagine we're going to start to target things like the Ashe, the Kalista, the Nocturne. These have all been very much staples over the course of today.
Yeah, they have been. Feels pretty static when it comes to bans thus far. LeBlanc did make it through in the previous game, was not selected. See if that is as much of a terror on stage as it was in the in-houses. Taking our time. Ashe gonna get banned away. Rumble, considered very strong as well. Expect that to be the first response, but instead the LeBlanc. Gotta give that respect to VTO, certainly area of comfort for him.
I think it is interesting to see the massively different reads that we had from all the different teams though so far. Like when you look at Fnatic, hey, tank frontline, scaling a Chanter with scaling an AD carry and just try and make that work in the later stages of the game. We look towards what Carmine Corp brought. It was like, hey, we're going to end up going for these more burst heavy with the Gragas and like a little bit more of a squishy lineup. And we've also seen some very aggressive early game champions coming through from BDS with like the Renekton and the Kalista and Pyke bot lane. So I think it's super interesting to see as we start to go through today, how each of the team has read the patch. Because, I mean, obviously it only came out a couple of days ago. Teams have been playing on the in-houses, but it feels like very different reads from a lot of these teams.
And I will say it's interesting. You're in an interesting situation. This is an incredibly unique situation just coming into the season, having so little time to prepare on the patch, having no other data to really pull from when it comes to the patch up until it came out on solo queue on Wednesday. So you're working with a very tight period of time. On top of that, we were playing pre-hotfix. So Riot Games basically said, here's a list of all the champions that are broken. And it's a massive opportunity for any team who feels comfortable to adapt on the fly to go, I am playing a statistically over-tuned champion right now. The more of those I pick up, probably, if I can perform on them, the higher my chances to win.
Yeah, unfortunately, we haven't seen Fizz today. I don't know if we're going to get to see Fizz,
Give me the fish. That's all I'm saying.
Look, Storm Surge is a very, very strong item on a lot of ludicrous
All I'm saying is,
so.
I know it's a high-pressure debut for Jackie's, but if he does it on Fizz and wins,
that'd be baller.
That would be the most baller thing I've seen in a very long time, yes. But for now, it's kind of the stock standard. Kalista will be locked in. A lot of good on-hit itemization coming through on the patch, and Kalista as oppressive as ever, but the quick response from Patrick is the Draven. Another super aggressive champion. Bot lane, kind of as always on this patch, expected to be explosive. What is the pairing going to be for the side of Team Vitality?
Yeah, I'm curious. There are like a lot of very aggressive supports you can go for with the Kalista. Like we heard the guys talking about things like the Nautilus that have come through. We've even seen some people experimenting. Shout out to Ox, who was experimenting with this yesterday, but I have seen other players pick it up, is Blood Song Nautilus, because basically it's the Sheen proc support item. You do a lot of damage with that pick if you do want to go hyper aggressive and work with your Kalista to go for that very oppressive 2v2, but going to go back towards the Jax, which is also very oppressive with the Titanic Hydra. We'll have to see what the final lock-in is going to be here. Do they just go for a mid laner here and secure that for themselves? No.
Taking their time. Obviously, Renata was kind of pick of the litter when it came to blind pickable supports at Worlds. Still very much feels like the case. She's kind of this nice in-between between the ranged enchanters and the melee engage options. That would be incredibly aggressive. It would also be Oh, he does it! Game one! Back on the LEC stage, we get the Ignar Blitzkranc. Hook legend. Will it be enough against Carzzy and Hylissang? Bot lane, we know for sure. It's getting ganks, it's getting kills. Someone somewhere in the bot lane will be dying.
But that's the thing, right? I think it makes it very difficult for Vitality to play that aggressive because you can't really play up if you end up getting hooked as the Kalista or even as the Renata. It's going to be a bad time into the Draven. So it's kind of put manners onto the bot lane from Vitality and given that opportunity for Peach now, who has arguably the most aggressive jungler, one of the most aggressive junglers to say on the patch, to see how he is going to be able to try and play around this bottom side. Maybe we end up with a similar thing to what we saw last game with the Jax being flexed into the jungle as an answer to this Xin Zao, but we'll have to see exactly what the game plan is for Vitality as we roll into the next stages.
No, Cassante now going to be taken off the board. You saw Oscar and his performance in the previous game. You can understand why the champion just looks very strong, especially if it's able to get a lead. So much of the itemization, that has been buffed this patch is accessible to Cassante, and a lot of the support itemization as well. And all of that he turns into damage, really, when he ults. So that's a lovely and fun interaction.
Yeah, I will also say Ornn is pretty busted on this patch if you're going to be looking for those top lane tanks, which Odo has kind of been very happy to take and just, hey, I'll survive the laning phase and take it to you in a team fight. And I think when you've already got a squad that's a Draven, you can try and take something like an Azir, maybe even here for Jackies. That's a great team fight that you've set up with even the pick potential with Blitzkranc to kind of supplement those.
And the nice thing about the potential Jax flex is they really have to pick a double flex here. It has to be something like the Gragas, something that could, in theory, jungle if they want to threaten that flex, because GIANTX are, of course, on red side. The question is, who do they want to save that last pick, counter pick for? Well, they're not going to save it for Jackie's. Interesting. Despite it being his first game on stage, he is confident enough to just blind pick the Neeko. Of course, relatively safe blind pick, can provide a lot of utility for the team. Doesn't need to be the star hyper carry by any means, but just need to look to set up a lot of those fights.
The only thing I'm worried about, though, with the Neeko is that you end up with pretty low damage if this Draven doesn't pop off. So you will end up getting the Rell, which I like as an adaptation. Take the Rell into the jungle. You've got that tank that if either of these carries don't really get into a position where they're just hard carrying the game, it's going to be difficult to try and get through that front line. You've also got a very up close and personal composition from GIANTX, where Rell can get a ton of value.
Rob?
Yes.
All I will say, and I don't believe it, but I will say it, is that the first time I saw Bo play Jungle Jax, he was supposed to play Rell, and I think he and Cabo didn't swap in time or decided at the last second to just roll with it and see what happened. So I do still expect to see the Jax in the top lane against a champion like Aatrox. I can't imagine Rell would have a good time, so we won't get the flex this time around, but I just want to put it out there.
Yeah, I mean, I do like the Aatrox in general on this patch. Big lethality item user. Even things like the Eclipse that doesn't give you lethality anymore, but even just the extra damage you get off the 2 hits is super nice for him. And then he's very, very flexible with the build paths he can go for. So into the Jax, I think he'll do relatively okay.
Also, lethality's good. Lethality's just much stronger. It's essentially just 40% stronger in the early game.
Yeah, and I've even seen people like going for like Spear Shojin and that kind of stuff and being a little bit more of your kind of typical tanky bruiser kind of style rather than just going for full lethality. So with Sundered Sky as your main first item as well. So I think that's the kind of one that we'll probably see Odo Amne go for into this matchup to get a bit of that, more of that tanky stats, have the heal available for you, and just up against the Jax would be super nice as well. But again, I think GIANTX very clear, hey, we want a team fight, we're going to be using Ignar as a go tool, or Jackie's hopefully coming in some of these flanks to set us up for success in that regard. Whereas for Vitality, at least you've got some pressure on side lanes thanks to that Jax, who will scale into the game as it goes on, but also then having a very strong 4-man team fight with that Rell to pull the ball.
Well, the Rell Renata especially, and you look at the side of GIANTX, relatively short range composition, the Xin, the Aatrox, the Draven. I'll need to be a little bit closer. It's not a Caitlyn, it's not a traditional scaling, hyper carry. Can be very vulnerable. So kind of eyes on GIANTX to see if they can come out on top. Here we go. 4th game of the day.